Hi, everyone. We're going to begin the webinar now. So I quickly want to ensure that everyone can hear me properly. So if you cannot, please indicate in the chat box. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Gallop Solutions and SmartBear joint webinar on API readiness. My name is Christina Lowe, and I'm the Partner Marketing Manager at SmartBear. Before we begin, I'd like to review a few housekeeping items. The webinar is being recorded, and we'll share the slides and the recording with you tomorrow. We will have a Q&A section at the end of the webinar, but feel free to add questions to the chat box or use our hashtag GallupSB on Twitter, and we'll answer your questions. After this webinar, please send all additional inquiries to marketing@gallup.net. So let me take the opportunity to introduce SmartBear and Gallop. SmartBear Software is the leading provider of software quality tools for the connected world. SmartBear supports more than 2 million professionals who use its products to build the world's greatest applications. SmartBear's tools assist with code review, functional and load testing, API readiness, and performance monitoring for all modern applications. Gallop Solutions is a 10-year-old US-based independent software testing services and QA staffing services company with offices in Pennsylvania and California. Gallup's IP-led software testing services have helped global organizations achieve significant market acceleration and returns on investment in their software quality initiatives. Gallop is a 100% subsidiary of Signetti Technologies, the world's third largest independent software testing services company. This webinar is the 7th one of Gallup's series termed Right Before Your Eyes. The earlier webinars were on diverse areas of software testing. So I would now like to take a moment and introduce our speakers. Rajesh Sarapanini leads the Technology Center of Excellence at Gallop and has been instrumental over 17 years helping clients implement processes that help build application performance by design rather than as an afterthought. He holds a couple of patents to his name in the testing space. And our next speaker is Michael Giller. He is the Manager of Technical Sales Engineering for SmartBear. He specializes in all things API and SOAP UI related. He focuses his writing about software quality development and how different types of people involved in software quality can coexist. Thank you, Rajesh and Michael, for a highly informative session today. To all our audience, hope you enjoyed today's program. Without any further delay, let me pass it over to Rajesh, who will briefly go over the agenda of the webinar and begin the presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you, Christina. Welcome, everybody. In terms of the agenda today, we'll basically talk 3 topics in terms of how the API testing landscape is evolving. Then we will deep dive into some of the SmartBear's capabilities to test API, and then we will also talk about Gallop success stories at one of our clients, and finally conclude on some of the differentiation which Gallop will bring during its service delivery. So without wasting time, we'll quickly move to the API testing world. We all know that API testing has been evolving, and there are several forces which are driving. And there has been tremendous transformation happening in software delivery, and specifically in the testing space. If you reflect on the past, we started with a waterfall sort of development methodology, moved on to iterative, and then quickly progressing towards agile, and then we are talking about DevOps. So people over processes, we are highly dependent on skilled experts. If you take a view of architectures, we have moved from monolithic applications to loosely coupled architectures, uh, debates around SOA and microservices. How do we build it? How do we test it? This is how we are progressing. And then we are moving away from development methodologies which require rigorous validation via stage gates to philosophies such as fail fast and fail cheap, and react to the market with a lot of agility. Again, a lot of documentation was focused in the early days. Now we are trying to see how we could optimally use develop code which is working rather than a lot of documentation. And we again moved from religious rituals like yearly releases to probably quarterly, monthly. We are talking about daily releases as well in the market. So all of this is being driven by business needs, and APIs and are being the cornerstone for some of the critical core software infrastructure which we are developing today. And what does it mean to IT? It means that we need to still meet the time to market goals, but mitigate some of the significant quality risks. And one of the prudent or commonsensical approach would be to start testing early. And it's obvious that we could start testing early, but we might lead into some of the challenges when we move. We know we have heard about shift left, but testing early would mean real challenges to be solved so that we can deliver quality. So I'd move on to highlight some of the challenges. So what are the key challenges? One is about, say, if I take a performance test capability from a software standpoint, establishing some smart goals in terms of response, throughput, scalability, how we can directionally move to that in terms of smarter metrics so that we prove continuously that we are able to deliver superior quality. And when we move early in the life cycle, there's a lot of design change, probably the API contract changes, and then you have to react, you have to be adaptive. How do we do that in an evolutionary manner? And the other key challenge when we talk starting about testing and API, testability is a critical factor. And how do we carve out a testable unit so that we are able to test this in a seamless manner? We know that when we start delivering APIs, some of them might not be ready, and some of them would have dependencies. So how do we ensure that testing is done early, but still be able to comprehend and be comprehensive and run your tests so as to prove that there are no defects and still be able to meet your timelines? And you want to do this continuously in a rhythmic manner. If you need that to happen, you need to be able to provision your test environments and test data, which is critical for you to execute your tests. And then finally, last but not the least, we need the right people. We need people with right skills who can help you set smart goals, adapt to changes, build out test beds which can be probably automated and deployed, create test data. So people is going to be a critical component. So moving on, at Gallop, we always want to codify and capture our best practices in the way we could implement best practices in a scalable manner so that we can take to our clients, repeat the same success story across our clients, of course keeping client context in mind. So what this has done is we know early is better when we are testing APIs because it's a critical software infrastructure. So the idea is to establish key criteria at the start and remove ambiguities from your requirements, make them smarter if they are objective in terms of performance requirements. And of course, since you want it to be repeatable, you need to automate them, probably build an automated pack of tests, be it performance, security, or your functional tests, which you want to do across the API layer, and then follow a rhythm. So basically, the idea is to test often, and automation will enable you to do that. So for each build deployment releases, you would have to have a rhythm and practice that so that you're predictable in your quality. And then not just look at layers of opportunities where it's superficial, but also test for some of the key asks which would be required by business. So if I take a performance view to multiple such test types like scalability, stress, and probably endurance, and include them as part of your sprint cycles so that we'll be able to test that upfront and then solve any issues in design which can be corrected early. And of course, testing is going to be an investment, so focusing on the right areas, making sure that you're able to provide the right metrics to the project teams and fail faster. So prove continuously that the software works. So, and focusing on the right areas is going to be important. What will all of this help you do? Of course, we know that by creating software, we create value, and by testing it early, what it would really mean is at multiple client situations in our case, we have helped them improve quality, mitigate the risks early. So the more defects we find early, the easier it is to fix. And early detection of bottlenecks, which mean that any design changes later in the cycle would be costly. So doing it early is going to be much better, improved quality. And since we probably would automate it and then thereby meet your time to market goals, so you do it faster. And of course, once you have a better software, you end up probably lowering your maintenance costs. And of course, using best practices will also ensure that your proven practices weed away a lot of software defects in API world. So what this would lead, of course, we talked about all the aspects. One of the key levers for us to achieve all of this we just spoke is having a capable tool. And at this point, I would like to ask Michael to deep dive on some of the key capabilities of the SmartBear gamut of tools, which will help you to understand how they can be useful in improving the overall productivity.
All right, thanks for that. So let me very quickly show my screen. Apologies about that. All right, so very, very excited about the partnership. So on the SmartBear side, I'll talk a little bit about what Ready API offers. Before I do, I'll also provide a very brief overview of SmartBear as a whole. So SmartBear is the leading provider of quality solutions. So we'll enable Gallop with tools that will ensure quality around all sorts of different applications. Through the APIs that you can see are in the center of the PowerPoint, we'll enable quality for desktop applications, mobile apps, so anything on the Android, iOS, we can test, on the back end, on the front end, for the whole quality of that application. Of course, anything on the web. So if you need to test websites, we'll provide solutions for that. So the record replay functionality, the cross-browser testing functionality, the automation piece. The automation piece within the tools is kind of infused throughout the whole quality. The Internet of Things, which is in some ways synonymous with APIs, is becoming a lot more prevalent. So really the solutions for the whole gamut of um, software, right? So this, of course, includes software that's enterprise-driven, that's up in the cloud, and even embedded software can be assisted by some of our solutions through code collaboration and making sure that it's developed well and consistently within large, spread out, dispersed teams. And again, these tools can assist in many different parts of the development lifecycle, even all the way over to operations side post-deployment once things are over in production. So with that, I actually want to very briefly show Ready API. So Ready API, which is one of the tools that you'll see used a good amount, offers interaction directly with the APIs. So this is something that will allow you to talk directly to your SOAP APIs, to your REST APIs, to JMS, to all sorts of different APIs over there. So you can see that within the project, we'll be able to talk to and send SOAP messages. We'll be able to send REST messages. We'll be able to send and compose anything over HTTP. You'll be able to string those steps together within SOAP UING section. So this is our functional testing that allows for automation, for stringing steps together, for calling different operations, for making sure that data is valid, consistent, repeatable, automatable. So this is something that, for example, can flow from your SOAP API and validate the data that comes back, to go to your REST API, validate the data stays consistent, maybe even do a database call, make sure that the backend data is consistent as well. And all of these pieces can be automated, do not require any coding at all, and you should just be able to go and set this up. So you can set up conditional flows, make this as realistic as possible, and ensure that this works from the user perspective. From that, you'll be able to spin up a load test, and within that load test, you'll be able to reuse all of the work that the testers have done from the functional perspective. So you'll be able to see different test cases as scenarios set up in a load test. So you can really have an approach to the API as an application, because so far from what I've seen, a lot of people in the industry don't test their APIs, or even when they do, it's more of a request response approach, or a unit test, or a partial test, just, am I getting back an HTTP response? Am I getting back a status code? It's not good enough. This tool will allow you to check the data, to check the data is consistent, parsable, and it reflects exactly what you're trying to do. Okay, so here with load testing, you'll be able to maintain those sophisticated single user, functional user logic flows, and then build out virtual users from that, build out and scale up the load test, performance test. You'll be able to perform a stress test against your API, and you'll be able to, for example, actively, continuously test load against the API, make sure it stays up. We'll even have some advanced things like allow you to distribute that load to different geographies up in the cloud. You'll be able to actively distribute an agent somewhere else. So if, for example, you're in one geographic location and your clients are in different geographic location, you can deploy the agent in that different geography and make sure that things work as behaved from that place. You'll be able to monitor your application server. So in this case, you can see I'm monitoring Windows, but we provide an ability to monitor Linux, application servers, and different servers as well. And I think there might be a delay. You'll see this in a second. But validate what the bottleneck pose very comprehensive statistics. And from that, we also have a way to do security testing. So for security testing, you'll be able to run common security tests such as cross-site scripting, fuzz and scan, injection tests, because again, an API is a window into your application. your applications have sensitive information. They contain potentially user data or your logic flows or some very specific data that you don't want just open in the world, even if it is a public API most of the time, right? And the security tests will allow you to ensure that SQL injection will not just allow people to pass through your login and authentication requests, that people are not able to inject malicious code via cross-site scripting. You can run a fuzzing scan where you can just run random parameters against your API and see whether things break, whether things slow down, or whether things stay up in the best case. Another thing we offer is service virtualization. So this is an awesome tool in the tool belt that will definitely be used by Gallop to overcome a lot of hurdles that often come up in API development and testing. So service virtualization, not really well known, but it essentially allows you to configure APIs and web services. So this will allow you to just configure a REST API or a SOAP API or a JMS response off the queue instead of coding, right? So if you want to do a quick prototype, you no longer have to code things, compile things, run through, compile debugging issues, then deploy that on the application server, administer the application server. With service virtualization, if you give me a WSDL but you don't give me an API, or if you give me some idea of how a web service behaves, like if you give me an example response, you'll just be able, I'll be able to configure that exact behavior with service virtualization in my own environment, typically within a minute or two. And I don't have to, get special credentials to go into your environment and find out how, a production application behaves or how a particular sandbox behaves. So you'll just be able to, modify responses, gather them, and edit them as well. This is also something that will be useful if you need to set up very specific data tests for integration. So if you're integrating and you're anticipating positive scenarios, negative scenarios, edge cases, etc., with service virtualization, you'll be able to set those up in the response, test against that, and then when the integration is pretty much bulletproof, you'll be able to repoint that against the real thing. So you can see there's a whole life cycle that goes almost from inception all the way to through testing, through performance testing, through security testing, and then at that point we can safely say that the API is ready for prime time. It can go live, and at that point we can still assist. So we have an ability to monitor APIs, which will allow you to also make sure that APIs stay up. So from different locations you can periodically test the API and make sure that it works well. So this will make sure that if it goes down, if integrations break, you're notified immediately. And you don't have angry customers who experienced hours of downtime because the API was down. So with that, you can see how SmartBear solutions for APIs specifically can assist. But again, there's additional tools out there that will assist for the UI side of it, for development side of it, for requirements and your ALM, application lifecycle management. And again, we're definitely gearing to helping different applications. This world's becoming a lot more connected in different ways. So we're past making sure that things work on the web or on Windows. We have different operating systems, different devices, different ways to interact with that one application. And because it's so threaded and connected by APIs and service-oriented architecture, the tool I've shown you helps you validate that the APIs at core are what stays up and what's there. So I do have some slides that I'll basically breeze. So again, this does work with REST and SOAP. So for REST, you should see that we can take HTTP traffic, which isn't really meant to be very human readable, and from that traffic we can often create a request that is human readable. So here you will see a request that's parsable, that is presented as a web form, the response that's also very clear, and we can do the same for SOAP. So for SOAP, when there's a WSDL, and for SOAP there must be a WSDL, if you can't read it, I can't read a WSDL either. I don't need to, because with our tool, again, you can automatically build and generate a kind of a readable web form request that interacts again directly with your API. So while your API will likely be in the integrated environment, it may be supporting your mobile apps, your automated services, your enterprise services. It may be doing different feeds, and we can automate a lot of that with the tool. And not only that, but we can put in a lot of checks to make sure that everything stays up. So far, from the screens I've shown you, this will work for request responses. But when you automate, you'll always want to generate reports. We can generate various reports. I'm just showing the printable one, where you can see in big red it says failed. So that's the printable, kind of easiest to digest, if you will, report that you can just look at and find out what the issue is. And again, this is something that you can often, within an hour or so, create, automate, set it up, and just be notified, every morning on any issues. Very easy to configure within the tool. So there's a lot of other features. Some of them I've gone over when I covered the product at a high level. So there's definitely a lot of focus on functional testing. That's very often the starting point. Automation is kind of the key goal for a lot of this. Analytics and reporting are key, because we have to enable you with results, and that's typically done through reports. Virtualization is the Service V solution that I've mentioned. It's one of those dark horses that most people don't know that solves a lot of hurdles. So if someone is pushing back and not giving you access to an environment, not deploying things well enough, or they give you access to an environment that consistently gets shut down and it interrupts your integration or your tests or your development, you can just virtualize it. Virtualization allows you to, for example, take traffic, look at the exact responses, and automatically generate a vert off of that. So you can see, for web services, we can offer coverage. This isn't code coverage. This is web service coverage, where if you have a descriptor, we'll say, well, some parts of your descriptors aren't tested, aren't looked at, so let's do that. If somehow you find that you still want more in terms of functionality, this tool is very extensible. So we offer scripting to extend that tool. Typically within a few lines of code, you can customize every request, you can mask data, you can do a lot of data transformation, you can do anything. As I mentioned, we do security testing, including SQL injection, XPath injection, a lot of other ones, about 15 other security tests. And we also do load testing specific to APIs. So I know in the industry it's very popular to use JMeter and other tools, but those are website testing tools. We're really the only load testing tool specifically for APIs. And if you start with SOAP UI already, if you have some existing test cases, you can just reuse those tests and build out a load test from that. So you can see Gallop pretty much brings it all together. So thanks for let me speak my piece, but Rajesh can take it from there.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. So we did see, so just to summarize where we are now in terms of what we were speaking. So we talked about what's the ecosystem looking like in the API world. Then we also touched upon doing early API testing is going to be critical and beneficial. The value which we would get from doing API testing, we saw a little bit of about how we do it using SmartBear capabilities, and that's going to be critical in terms of your automation, performance, service virtualization, and then the rest of the presentation, the focus would be on again the how we do it in Gallop, and also where did we do this. So that will give you a lot of confidence in the ability to deliver API testing in an automated way. So for the next 10-15 minutes, we'll spend some time on how we do it in a Gallop way. So as I articulated some time back, we do want to codify some of our best practices. We want them to be repeatable, scalable, and take it to multiple clients. So what has worked for us and for multiple client situations, and of course each client context is going to be different, but some of them have been some best practices which we have evolved over our service delivery. So we knew that setting smart goals at upfront is going to be key in terms of what we would do. So involving multiple stakeholders from BAs to the tech arcs to the dev arcs, all of them at the start to ensure that you have the right set of requirements articulated. And specifically in the case of API performance, sometimes we do get into challenges of what is going to be the ask in terms of throughput or the response, and what is really testable. So sometimes we also use production logs, usage, workload patterns, understand them, and then map them back to your API performance, look at transformational architecture and changes which are happening to your architecture, and map that back to your API requirements. So that will enable you to constantly act as a guiding force to test those requirements in an objective way. And that will give you a lot of predictability and confidence in the quality that is being built. And the second one, we manage change. As I told, one of the key challenges upfront is about when you start involving in the earlier life cycles of dev, design, test, a lot of changes are bound to happen, and being adaptive to them is going to be critical. And that is possible only if you have techniques which will allow the testing teams to analyze the change, the relevant impact via multiple other techniques. So dependency matrix could be one of them, to maintain and then understand what got changed, why it changed, and what are the impacts for that, and then adapt so that you'll be able to respond to that change. And in terms of driving velocity, one of the key techniques which has worked for us and in multiple client situations is about setting up the whole test environment, automating the build and deploy processes, generating test data, and of course virtualization. Wherever we had challenges in terms of non-availability of a particular service still getting delayed or being developed, we've used virtualization to the maximum extent to ensure that we are able to test some of these APIs independently. And but not least, we have built accelerators in terms of if you want to do a high volume test, with a click of button, we could use WSDL to generate test data and then feed that as to the SmartBear tools, which would run as a data-driven test if it was a functional automation test which you are doing. And also, as part of our security team's research, we have identified common vulnerabilities and the respective patterns. Using some of these WSDLs, we could generate some of the security test cases as well. And that is something which you could use as part of Gallup's differentiation. Finally, I think people being critical, we have testers with a lot of programming and technology skills who can relate to API, the architecture world, talk to the product management teams equally with the business analyst as well as technology architects to relate to their world and understand what it takes to test this API in the client's ecosystem. So moving on, I would talk about an interesting case study where, or a success story, I would say, for a leading e-commerce solution. When we started to engage with this client, he was trying to transform his software delivery from waterfall to agile. They picked up a 4 weeks release cycle, which the market has demanded, so that they can be agile, can push more in terms of the APIs which get consumed. And this happened for about 3 such cycles, so 3 releases went, and every time when we got engaged, it was more functional automation, service virtualization to some extent, but then performance was the last piece which was done, and then it got delivered. So in production, we did have challenges. So there was a lot of thinking around how can we push performance testing early in the life cycle, and how can we ensure that we have enough test coverage, we are able to do multiple test types, and the ability to pinpoint bottlenecks before it actually starts to appear in your production, and kind of redesign what is being built. So those were the challenges which the client faced. So the way Gallop approach, I said some of what I discussed in the last slide was pretty much being utilized. And also one of the key factors was we also had experts in our team who understand and appreciate architecture, design, and also we co-located along with the entire dev and test teams, so that they are able to be participative in the entire life cycle. The other thing was to choose the right test tool so that you are able to test this more frequently, automate it, give your results back, do a lot of analysis till the code level, and also use some profiling tools and APM tools to pass on the feedback in terms of the hotspots in your production. And of course, it was all part of the agile sprints which we did, and we enabled the teams to do a lot of introspection in terms of what type of change was introduced, and then also take cognizance of the fact of performance being one of the key critical aspects, so that they can deliver A, in time, B, in terms of the overall expectation of response times and throughput. So in a 4-week cycle, we were able to run 50 plus performance test runs. We delivered 2x improvements in scalability, 5x improvement in terms of response time. And of course, the most critical aspect which the business was looking for was sizing inputs, so that they can recommend their clients what sort of hardware they need to use. So this, in a nutshell, what we were able to provide as a means to our clients. And as I said, we always strive to codify, use those best practices into a client context based on the applicability, and deliver software testing in a superior manner, which will make our clients proud of in what they do from a testing standpoint. So that's in a nutshell in terms of success story. Moving on, Gallop has a gamut of services specifically focused on API, functional testing, test automation, performance, and security. We've been there, done that in terms of all the offerings. We have a great service delivery model which is co-located and of course on-site, offshore, based on what the customer would want to. We bring in our IP so that we can help the clients accelerate their testing, and of course the people, which is a critical component which will help them to deliver what is required on the ground. So that's in a nutshell what we wanted to give you a picture of the capabilities as well as what we could do in the API testing world.
Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you, Rajesh and Michael, for a wonderful presentation. We would like to request questions from the audience. So if you could please note down the questions you have on the right side of the panel. We will take on questions one by one. Okay, we have one question, Rajesh. How do accelerators help in testing, and which differentiates Gallop services? And the question is from Rahul.
Yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of when you take a look at testing life cycle, in terms of test design, test execution, and if you're writing your scripts, the hardest part is in terms of test design, setting up your test data. So what Gallop does is, from an API standpoint, if you need to, we have a ready-to-use library and an accelerator which will understand your testing context in terms of the API. It will help you to generate test data and optimize test cases. We have built our own IP which can wrap around the API and also use the pairwise testing technique to optimize the test combinations, which will help you to in turn focus on the right set of testing procedures and test data combinations, which you could then input to your API to ensure that the entire coverage is ensured from a pairwise combination. So that is something which has been prominently used and helpful for clients to make decisions to either increase their coverage or optimize their coverage and also improve the overall testing productivity.
Yeah, thank you, Rajesh. Rahul, I hope the answer was exactly appropriate for your question. We have another question from Chris, who says, thank you for the presentation. Regarding API testing in general, is there a scenario where Selenium WebDriver might be a good option? Michael,
yeah,
is that
I can answer that.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Selenium WebDriver is not a good option for an API. It is used for a website. However, things are definitely related. So if you want to make a change in the API and make sure that it works for Selenium, so we will have an official integration with Selenium, I believe, in the next major version that I can speak to and propose. There's a number of integrations between SoapUI and Selenium done in the user community, but as I mentioned, in the next release of Ready API, next major release, which should be done by sometime by the end of a quarter, we will have an official Selenium integration. For now, the way we test both APIs and websites are, using Test Complete, which is another SmartBear product for testing the website, which offers very, very comprehensive record replay website automation testing functionality. So it's a great alternative to Selenium. But I get it. There's a lot of Selenium scripts. That's why we're embracing it, and we'll integrate with it in the next major release.
Thanks, Michael. We have another question, which is from Jaya. She says, can the test scripts created in SoapUI Pro be loaded into Jira?
Yes. So that's so the test you can, through our automation component, call from Jira, and then in the very latest version that we've released, of version 1.3, you'll also be able to log any issues in Jira in case a test fails. So we're integrating with Jira through that way. Yeah, great questions.
I think we are done with the questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending the session, and thank you so much, Michael and Rajesh. If you have any further questions on API testing, you can send an email to marketing@gallup.net. And if you'd like to download the Ready API, you can visit smartbear.com, and there is a URL which is mentioned on the screen. We will also be sending out the recording of the webinar to all the people who have attended it. And in that, we will also include the link. So you can definitely go ahead and take a trial of the Ready API. And in case you face any issues, you can definitely reach out to marketing@gallup.net, and we will definitely assist you out. Thank you so much, everyone. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you all.
Thanks.